Welcome to Upticks. I'm Jake Falcon.
And I'm Corey Bittner. We're the founders of Falcon Wealth Advisors and your co-host for Upticks.
Today's our 36th episode, Things People Say.
We're going to talk about 3 tips for retirement, questions worth asking, and things people say.
All right, Corey, so to kick off our first topic today, we wanted to give our viewers 3 simple tips that they can use when they're approaching retirement. And so, I don't know, did you outline 3 or is this coming 100% from me?
I have one in mind off the top of my head.
Okay, well how about,
Let's do that.
I'll fire off mine,
Okay.
let you add yours, and then we'll see where I can backfill in here.
Perfect.
So my first tip for someone that's looking to plan on retirement, and this is somebody usually 5 or 10 years away, or maybe even sooner, is to seek out advice from a chartered retirement planning counselor. And what that is that's somebody that's in our profession, that's a wealth advisor, that's taken the time to educate themselves on the nuances of retirement. So they should be familiar with IRA rollovers, Social Security, health insurance. It's somebody that's really taken their profession seriously, and they're not just this one-size-fits-all advisor, but they're somebody that is catering to retirees and looking to help them with their specific needs. So that was number one. That was my tip number one is, if you're out there looking for an advisor or looking for some help, make sure that person is a chartered retirement planning counselor.
Can I go ahead and chime in because mine sort of goes right along with that?
Perfect, yeah.
So recently I wrote a blog post about differentiators. And what I talked about specifically in that blog post was if you are hiring an advisor or if you already have an advisor and you're trying to figure out whether or not you're working with the right person, ultimately my point was make sure that you're working with someone who is an expert in whatever area that it is that you need assistance. And I was thinking about retirement specifically, as that's a big part of our business and what we do. But don't just accept, I specialize in retirement planning as, for that being what it is. Because I suspect any advisor, if you ask them if they know about retirement planning, they're going to say yes. What I was thinking was, make sure you have someone that can help you or can at least point you in the right direction of someone that can help answer questions also around healthcare and Medicare and Social Security too. That could be a bigger decision than people, regardless of how much money you have, that can be a bigger decision than people give it credit for.
No,
and then
really
understand,
good.
like you said, all of the nuances. So my point there was work with someone who can add the value of why they can differentiate themselves from the pack.
Right, and just be careful too, because expert is a buzzword in our industry. That's
True.
something that
Yeah,
a financial professional really can't, advertise themselves as. But there's things that you can do. You can ask them questions. How many retirees do you work with? Or, what companies have you helped people retire from? Do you have credentials, and what do those credentials mean? And that's really what Corey's getting at is that, Corey, at least, he and I on our team, we've taken the time to get the credentials. We work with a ton of people that retire from various companies, typically in Kansas City, and we're very familiar with the process. And so that's good. So that's tip number 1 in here. So tip number 2 that I had, and I've got them written down here, is make sure that you have health insurance, a plan for health insurance, and a plan for when you're going to start collecting Social Security. Health insurance is a big deal, something that we talk about all the time with our clients. Because what's happening is as people are separating from employers, they typically will go on COBRA, which is basically a way to access your company's health insurance for 18 months. But if you're 55 years old or you're 60 years old, that's only going to get you a year and a half, and you've got to figure out something that's going to last you until you get on to Medicare, which doesn't apply until you're 65. Maybe you can comment on experiences that you've had with clients and seeking out health insurance for somebody that is younger than 65. What do they do?
I think probably the first thing to do is it's a good question. I was thinking about, we obviously, because we have some experience there, can have a discussion around what sort of average costs are. But I think that it's a good idea to find somebody who's an expert, and we have people.
There's your buzzword expert.
I got to stop using that word expert.
Maybe a health insurance professional.
Yeah, how about a health insurance professional? That's a better descriptor. But the idea is somebody that can actually give them a good idea of what that cost is going to look like. Because I do think, even though people understand that it's going to be a big expense, in my experience, people still, despite knowing that, are still surprised to find out how big of an expense that it's going to
Right.
be. And you want to make sure that that's factored into your sort of cash flow and goals as far as your plan
Exactly.
goes before you retire.
So what we do is we create financial plans for our clients, and we'll actually insert a column titled health insurance, and we make sure that we get that budgeted into the financial plan.
Right.
The second thing I pointed out was that also having a plan for Social Security. Now, Social Security is a complex in its own nature, and you can start collecting as early as 62 or wait until you're 70. And if you wait after your age 70, there really is no benefit to waiting.
Right.
So it'd be silly to wait after 70 because, of course, you've paid into it. You want to start receiving that benefit. So for our clients, what we do is we'll crunch the numbers. We'll run an analysis, and we'll take your Social Security, and if you're married, your spouse's Social Security, both of your benefits into an account, and we'll actually tell you mathematically what makes sense as far as taking your Social Security. And then we won't really rely on those numbers only. We'll actually have a more intelligent conversation with you to see what your specific needs are as well. So those are probably two very important things that I think sometimes people overlook when they're thinking about retiring. A lot of times you say, you know what, I'm tired of my boss. I don't want to, I'm stressed out. I don't want to deal with this anymore. I want to start traveling or spending more
Right.
time with my grandkids.
Yep.
But two financial things that you want to make sure that you have lined up are that health insurance and Social Security.
That's good. What's your third?
The third tip that I have for today is basically understanding your distribution options. And so if you retire and you're under the age of 59 and a half, you may not be able to access your 401k without paying a penalty or doing something called a 72T distribution, which is a whole nother topic for a different show. But it's just understanding your options. Now, maybe you can go into what if somebody's 55 and they have money, all their money's in their 401k, what can they do, Corey?
In that particular situation, if somebody is retiring in the year that they turn 55 or older, money that's left in their 401k plan is accessible to them as long as they leave it there penalty-free. Now, sometimes certain companies have nuances around how often you can take distributions or how many you're allowed to take between when you retire and 59 and a half or whatever it might be. But it's an IRS rule that I think sometimes people aren't always that familiar with, that if you leave money in your 401k and you're retiring in the year that you turn 55 or older, you do have access and there's liquidity there for money penalty-free before the sort of standard age of 59 and a half that we think about as far as penalty-free distributions go.
Right, but you want to be very careful because if you're 56 and you start working with an advisor and they recommend you roll over all of your 401k to an IRA, well, now you may have limited your accessibility of those assets, or you may have made it a lot more complicated, or potentially you may end up having to pay a penalty. So you just, again, that's again why Corey and I have spent a lot of our time educating ourselves on the nuances of retirement planning, because there are some flexibility avenues available to those who know and play by the rules.
Exactly.
So good. So, again, to wrap up this segment, 3 takeaways. 1, work with a professional that is working with retirees. It just makes sense. If I want to go to a dentist or my dentist, we don't talk about eyes, right? We're talking about teeth because that's what he or she does. So when you're working with a financial planner and you're looking for some retirement advice, look for an advisor that works with retirees.
Yes.
Make sure you got a plan for health insurance and Social Security, and then make sure you understand where the heck am I going to get my income from and what are the rules associated with doing so.
Yep.
Okay, very good. So to switch gears a little bit and go into our next topic, we want to go into our fun topic that we've been putting on our shows, which is called Questions Worth Asking. So I'll let you fire away first this week. If you want to ask me your question, I'll see if I can answer it.
All right. So my question for you, Jake, is, and this is coming from a client,
Okay.
if I have the money in an after-tax account and I'm looking at purchasing a second home, at what point does it make sense to just pay cash for a home or potentially borrow against my portfolio to pay cash for a home if financing and a mortgage is not an option?
Okay, I'm going to use one of your lines here where it says it depends.
Okay.
Right?
And what's it depend on?
Well, so you're saying they have cash. Let's say they have, to do some math here, let's say they have $300,000 in an after-tax account.
Yes.
Right? And so you're saying that this particular client, and that may not be their dollar amount, and that's fine. We obviously wouldn't want to go into any specifics with that client. But so if you have $300,000 in an account and you say, okay, I'm going to go buy a house for $150,000 or whatever it is, do I just cash out that money or do I actually keep it invested and borrow against it? Is that
That's
what you're
exactly
saying?
my question.
Okay, so what we would do first and foremost is we would plug both of those scenarios into their financial plan and see what's going to make most sense long term. Now, to kind of go over the options and what it would look like is if you borrow, we would want to look at what that margin rate would be.
What's margin?
Margin is basically a loan against your account. So if you have, you can think of your securities as collateral. So if you have your money invested in the market and it's in an after-tax account, you actually can borrow against your own account. And let's say the rate is 3 or 4%. You can borrow against it. And if your account is making 6 or 7, well, that's a good investment, right? And the interest is costing you 4, but your money is making you 6 or 7.
Yeah.
You're netting out 2 or 3% on your money.
Right.
Now, I've been doing this a long time, and for some people, they get it, and that makes sense, and they like to make that spread. For others, they say, I get it, Jake, but I don't like having any debt, and so I don't want to owe myself or whoever. I don't want to pay interest, so I don't want to have it. So again, that's when we'll run those scenarios side by side and take a look at it. We'll also want to see what those securities are currently invested in.
Right.
You may have it all in one stock or something that's concentrated and it may be down, so you don't want to sell it. So that would be another reason to borrow. So again, it depends on the situation, and we would basically first and foremost run a financial plan and look at the scenario side by side, and then we just have an in-depth conversation about what scenario makes sense. But believe it or not, there is no cookie cutter response to that. There is no right or wrong way, and frankly, if a client can afford to do either, they should really do what makes most sense that's comfortable to them.
Exactly.
Because again, we believe that your money's doing you no good if it's keeping you up at night and causing you panic or fear.
And my thinking there too was the exact same thing, that there is, first let's talk about the dollars and cents, what makes sense from a financial standpoint. But if, like you said, you can afford to take advantage of either scenario, let's talk about what you're more comfortable with.
No. Did I answer it?
You did.
All right.
Well done.
You didn't stump me this week. All right, I got one for you. This comes up fairly often, particularly our younger clients. It says, Corey, should I invest in my 401k with pre-tax dollars or with Roth dollars? So should I use, basically, this is for someone that has a 401k at their company, they're still working, and they say, should I put money in pre-tax or should I use this silly Roth thing that my 401k, and really what is that?
So, of course, I'm going to say that it depends, because it does. But I want to talk about what it depends upon and the things that you should be looking at. So first off, at a very high level, if in this scenario I was contributing to my 401k and I was putting money in pre-tax, that means that the money was deducted from my gross paycheck and put into that account before I pay taxes on it. And then it's invested in growing and the taxes are deferred, meaning each and every year I'm not responsible for paying taxes on what the account makes. However, once I'm retired and I start, or not even necessarily retired, but once I start taking distributions from that account, I will owe income tax on the dollar amount that I take out in any given year.
And a potential penalty, I guess.
And a potential penalty depending on your age. Now, on the other hand, more and more companies now are offering a Roth 401k option. What that looks like is it's very similar except for one big difference. The idea is you pay the taxes on the money up front. So after it comes out of your paycheck, you pay taxes, and then the net dollar amount goes into your 401k after tax.
Okay.
Now, the idea there is the money's growing tax-free. So the idea is when you're taking distributions in retirement, or whenever, I guess I should say, when you're taking distributions down the road, you don't owe income tax on the distributions that you're taking.
All right, very good. And penalties still may apply on your age with a Roth IRA as well.
Correct.
So let's talk about that real quick before you answer the question. So if you have $1 million in your 401k, and if you saved all of that money pre-tax, it's really not $1 million, is it?
No, it's $1 million minus income tax.
Right, but if you save $1 million in a Roth 401k, well, now that money really is $1 million.
Right.
Right, because you won't owe taxes on the distribution.
Correct.
So particularly for somebody that's younger and looking to start their savings, this is something that can be a really big deal down the road. So how would you answer this question now that we've kind of defined what the differences are?
And I think it's coincidental, but I'm glad you asked this one because I quite literally just had an in-depth discussion with someone about this yesterday who's in this particular scenario that was trying to figure out the same thing. And I think that it depends on your age relative to when you plan to retire.
Okay.
So when we talk about someone being young, that could qualify as someone who's 25 or someone who's 40, right? It's a question of when do you plan on retiring? Also, it's a question of what's your income, right?
Right.
And if you're married, what's you and your wife's or husband's combined income, et cetera. So those are big determining factors, because the idea is if someone's a really high income earner, there might be more of an incentive to make pre-tax contributions because they're deferring their income right now while their income is really high. But on the flip side of that, if somebody is not earning as much income, it might make sense to make the Roth contributions, because that way they're paying taxes in their current tax bracket, which hopefully isn't too high, and then that money's growing tax-free. Where my mind gets a little wrapped up when I think about this is, what if my husband and I or my wife and I are high income earners, let's say over six figures combined, but we're only 30 years old and we plan to work until 50 or 60. Despite the fact that we make more income, does it make sense to be making Roth contributions now, simply because of the fact that we're going to get that tax-free growth over a long period of time? And you can run the math calculation and figure it out, but I think it's so situational.
Right.
It's so dependent upon each person and their situation. So if you're talking to a coworker and you're debating, what makes the most sense, you have to recognize that everybody's situation is going to be totally different.
Right. But a good rule of thumb is, generally speaking, the lower the income, the more a Roth probably makes sense.
Exactly.
The higher the income, maybe the Roth doesn't make as much sense. And again, you're trying to juggle what your tax rate is going to be post-retirement. And we all know the government reserves the right to change that all the time. So I don't typically, particularly for a younger client that has a longer time horizon before they're going to retire, we like to blend it typically. So it's not normally an all or none. So that's another maybe answer to that question, is that maybe you could do half in the pre-tax and half in the Roth, or in any other different combination of that. I like that a little bit, because now you're setting yourself up to be tax diversified, so that when you do go to retire, maybe you've got $500,000 in a traditional 401k and $500,000 in a Roth, and no matter what Uncle Sam does or whatever they decide to do with the tax rates, you can juggle it. Yeah. So good answer.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's and again, I think it's an interesting one.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree, and it does come up. Certainly comes up. All right, perfect. So that concludes our questions worth asking segment. So for the other topic of today's show, I wanted to talk about, kind of make it a little bit more fun, is that I wanted to talk about things people say. And I wanted to say, maybe to kick off, just to kind of get a good laugh out of today, is maybe joking a little bit. Maybe we'll talk about things that clients never say. So do you have something maybe that you never hear from a client, or very rarely hear from a client?
I do.
Okay.
I have one that I don't think anyone's ever asked me before.
All right, let's hear it.
Things clients never say, and I wrote them down here. Do you think I have too much money?
Right, that's a good one. So typically people aren't concerned about having too many millions of dollars, but that's a good one. I have one. I've got my account was up and the market was down. Thanks. The phone never rings. And it does happen. The Dow will be down 100 points or 200 points. In our portfolio, since we are picking individual stocks and bonds for our clients, sometimes it'll be up.
Right.
And it's funny how clients, sometimes they miss that and they don't recognize. But I have had some people recognize it, so I do want to thank them for that. But it is something that's really
We'll joke here in the office sometimes. Hey, our portfolio was up and the market was down. How come the phone's not ringing?
Right, how come nobody's calling us? But it does happen. I mean, that's what the value we're trying to add.
Of course.
Do you get another one?
I do. The next one is, it sort of goes along with that, but I guess the things that I've never heard someone say is, do you think that my account's up too much?
Is my return too high?
Is my return too high?
Yeah,
Have I made too much money?
Yeah, that doesn't come up either.
It never comes up.
All right, so why don't we switch it? So, Corey and I, we hold ourselves as fiduciary advisors. We take our profession seriously, and we consider ourselves more of professionals rather than salesmen. A salesman would be your traditional broker, someone that's charging you a commission, and they don't necessarily need to follow a best interest legal liability. So I wanted to say, maybe switch it to things that brokers say. And I got one here. Things that brokers say will say, your bonds are free. And I just laugh at that. It's embarrassing for the industry that people say that, and it's embarrassing for clients to actually believe that somebody's going to actually invest your money and literally not charge you anything.
Right.
So bonds are free. Yeah, I would. Huge red flag.
Agreed.
You got one?
I have another one. Things that brokers say. Oh, the cost to buy a bond is built into the price. Meaning, the commission.
They do say that.
Right.
They do say that. But what do you mean by that?
My point there is the commission that a broker is going to get paid that they're not necessarily required to disclose is almost an off-the-cuff dismissed as, the cost to buy it is built into the price. But it can be significant.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And if you're dismissive of it in that sense, I just think that's problematic.
Yeah, absolutely. Another one is a lot of brokers, they'll try to compete on price. Our fees are lower, so therefore you should work with us. Well, you know what? The fees are low at McDonald's, but that doesn't mean I go eat there.
Right.
I firmly believe you get what you pay for. And sometimes you may need to pay a little bit more, but you know that you're working with somebody that's a true professional and it's going to act in their best interest. I mean, certain things I value and I'm willing to pay a premium for, and certain things I don't. So I guess if your financial advisor is not something that you value, then maybe you should go for the cheapest option. Maybe you should go to a Vanguard or somebody that are very low fees. But I feel you get what you pay for. So again, I wouldn't make an investment decision based on or a relationship decision on which advisor you're going to work with based on fees. A broker will always try to compete on fees because they're salesmen, right? Buy my widget, it's cheaper.
Right.
So, do you get any more?
Yeah, the last one I was going to say is things that brokers say. Well, this is things that brokers never say.
Okay.
Can I throw that one
out
out
there?
Yeah,
go ahead.
That? I think you should go with the product that's going to pay me a smaller commission.
Yeah, they never say that. Yeah. And again, a broker, because they're not legally obligated to act in your best interest, they typically go with a higher paying product. Why wouldn't they? I mean, they're salesmen.
It's an incentive structure. It's
called an upsell. Just like when you sit down at a restaurant, they ask you, they typically don't ask you if you want water. They're trying to sell you pop or, liquor or whatever. Something they're trying to upcharge you. Do you want an appetizer? Do you want a salad with your meal? And all that is to generate more revenue for the restaurant.
And I notice where sometimes I'll get got as far as that goes. And again, it's a good problem to have. But it's like if my fiance Cassie and I both like Pinot Noir, right? So if we go to a restaurant and order a bottle of wine and you order maybe one of the cheaper options, it seems like very frequently they're quick to point out, well, the next bottle that's a little bit more expensive is better.
Right.
Because I'm someone that I don't know.
You're probably always like, let's get that one.
If
I love my fiance.
I'm sure it's better.
That's not a bad thing.
No,
and I think we're not saying brokers are a bad thing.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that you need to understand what type of relationship you're going into when you're working with somebody who, may not be acting in your best interest. And a quick red flag on this is we transfer a lot of accounts from brokers, and they'll have an account where they're acting as a fiduciary, and they'll have another account where they're acting as a broker.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful. So if they're splitting up your money into different accounts, you want to figure out why they're doing it. And they're doing that just to diversify their income. They're doing that so they can be a salesman in one instance and they can be an advisor in another. And we don't believe in that. And again, it doesn't make them bad people. It's a different way of doing business, and that's not for us.
It's like if Monday through Thursday I was your fiduciary and I was acting in your best interest, but on Fridays that's when I like to generate commissions.
That's when you sell stuff. So
Yeah.
we just don't. That doesn't work for us. That's not our culture.
Nope.
Okay, good. So that was our things people say. Hopefully, some people got some laughs out of it. Okay, so for our fun global topic today, I wanted to ask you, and I don't think I've given you any hints on this one. I have
no idea.
Okay, I wanted to ask you either who taught you about money or where do you first remember learning about money?
I remember first learning about money from my parents.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be most people. And do you remember what they taught you?
Well, this isn't well, as far as what they taught me, I think how about I talk about what I took away?
Sure.
Which again they taught me a lot. But if I'm talking about what I took away, it was at a young age is when I started working. And my very first job, I was a caddy on a golf course that I think I was literally.
So how old were you?
I think I was like 13.
Okay, so
and I was able
13
to go
years old.
out there, carry a bag for 18 holes.
Sure, you violated some labor laws maybe, but that's fine.
Oh, but yeah, it's certainly a possibility. Anyway, the idea is I was doing that at that age, and I think that they taught me the value in earning money for what it is you want. Because at that time, I was a big golfer. I loved playing golf, and I wanted a King Cobra driver. For whatever reason, that's what I had my mind dead set on. And my parents said, you know what? you can get one, but you're going to have to save the money to be able to buy it for yourself, or save a portion of the money and, we'll go in on it with you. But then I learned that, from going and doing this and showing up to work, and, at that age, we'd get there at 6 or 7 in the morning on a Saturday or a Sunday. That's a good lesson to learn. Like, you have to sort
Work
of,
ethic, sure.
work ethic, get up and go for it. But saving that money, and I ended up buying it, but I think that I probably felt so much better about it, and it's funny that I still have that driver because it was, the first sort of major purchase that I made on my own. But
Nice.
I felt good about it because it wasn't just
saved.
given to me. I saved for it.
Nice.
And I set a goal.
That is a good takeaway. I think for my parents, I don't know if they even told me this, but I feel like it's something maybe that I did talk about, is that they try to make it a point not to fight about money. I think that breaks up a lot of relationships, sadly. And I'm not saying that our family's perfect, and that probably at some point there's been arguments over it, but we try to kind of keep that as like, let's not argue over money. And then I wouldn't say my parents splurge, but if you want to get something nice, get something nice. I mean, I come from a very hardworking family. I admire both of my parents. My whole family, for that matter. We're just hardworking people, and they're not out there buying private yachts or anything like that. But if they want my dad wants a nice golf club, he goes and buys it. And if my mom wants to buy something on QVC, she gets it. And they make it work. And I think that's made hopefully their lives enjoyable. So I kind of take that into my relationship with Rachel, and I try hard not to fight about money or make it an issue. We definitely live within our means, and but if we want to do something nice, we do it, and we enjoy ourselves, and in the end, that's what money is, in my opinion. It's a commodity. It's a means to an end, and it doesn't make you happy or unhappy. It shouldn't, and your life certainly shouldn't revolve around it. But if you have it and you want to do something nice and enjoy an experience, I think Rachel's really good at that. She's really more about experiences than things, which I think is pretty cool. And she's kind of opened my eyes up to that. I don't know. I think it can be pretty valuable. So the reason I brought this up is we'd like to hear some of your stories on how you learned about money. So if you do want to comment on this, or you have a topic for the show, please feel free to let Corey and I know. We'd love to hear about what your stories are about money, or who taught you about money early on.
Or lessons that you took away.
Absolutely.
Which goes along with that. Yeah, we're always interested in hearing that.
Yeah. So that wraps up the time that we have for today's show. Again, thank you as always for tuning in. Please subscribe to our channel on YouTube and like our stuff on Facebook. We're also out there on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And you can find me personally on Twitter at Jake Falcon, CRPC.
And you can find me at Corey Bittner, KC.
Thanks again for watching, and we hope you all have a great week.